Welcome back to Nate the Hate, where today I am once again joined by Modern Vintage Gamer.
How you doing, Nate? It's great to be back. Thanks for having me on the
Oh,
show.
always good to have you here. And today's topic is, of course, the cancellation of E3 2020, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we both saw this coming last week.
We did, Nate. We predicted it. We said, and I think you said something on the lines of they took a couple of jabs and then Sony came in and hit them with a haymaker and they were wobbling. But last week we felt like the end was coming, and just yesterday the knockout punch was delivered, and E3 2020 is not happening. Cancelled.
Yep. It has been TKO'd for at least a year. And the ESA put out this statement today where it said, after a careful consultation with our member companies regarding the health and safety of everyone in our industry, our fans, our employees, our exhibitors, and our longtime E3 partners, we have made the difficult decision to cancel E3 2020, scheduled for June 9th through 11th in Los Angeles. Following increased and overwhelming concerns about the C, we felt this was the best way to proceed during such an unprecedented global situation. We are very disappointed that we are unable to hold this event for our fans and supporters, but know it's the right decision based on the information we have today. Our team will be reaching out directly to exhibitors and attendees with information about providing full refunds. We are also exploring options with our members to coordinate an online experience to showcase industry announcements and news in June 2020. Updates will be shared on e3expo.com. We thank everyone who shared their views on reimagining E3 this year. We look forward to bringing you E3 2021 as a reimagined event that brings fans, media, and industry together in a showcase that celebrates the global video game industry. So once this statement came out, Microsoft was quick to respond when Phil Spencer went to Twitter and said, E3 has always been an important moment for Team Xbox. Given this decision, this year we'll celebrate the next generation of gaming with the Xbox community and all who love to play via an Xbox digital event. Details on timing and more in the coming weeks. So, Microsoft's already looking ahead. They're basically going the route that Nintendo does with a direct style approach where they will go to YouTube or the, Mixer, and they will do probably their planned conference just in a digital format.
Inside Xbox.
Inside Xbox, that's what they're called. No one ever seems to remember that. Probably for good reason. But so Microsoft's looking ahead, and it seems ESA is ready to reach out to some of the other exhibitors who are going to be on the show floor, or at least in the LA area in June, and maybe try to organize a digital event of their own, and they can use Twitch and YouTube to reach out to the fans. So what was your first reaction to when the news broke this morning?
Well, Nate, not surprised. I did say last time, and I'm not trying to gloat or brag or say that I called it right, but I called it right. I gave them 48 hours, and almost on the nose, I predicted it. We saw the Devolver Digital tweet come out on Tuesday night talking about how cancel your flights. E3 is done, and we were kind of scratching our heads. But on the flip side, we were like, well, we kind of saw this coming. We knew this was going to happen. I think a lot of us were maybe a little surprised that it came so early, but given the situation that's been going on around the world, plus and this is just me spitballing, the rumblings I keep hearing about publishers wanting to change E3 for the better, and in some cases some of them completely pulling out, like Sony. It seemed like it was just a matter of time before they cancel it, and yeah, I mean, here we are. It's done, and we have to look forward to next year. Now, I think for me, again, I thought this was going to happen, and it did, and I do think it was the right thing to do. I talked to a lot of people today, industry people, developers, fans, just kind of a bit of a spectrum of different people, and look, the consensus is it's disappointing that it's been cancelled. Some of the fans and kind of the public were, I don't want to say happy, but they felt like, well, the E3 has been becoming relevant for a long time, and here we are. I don't think, the situation around the world is the only reason why E3 was cancelled, but it certainly is a huge factor as to why it was, especially with the timing. But look, yeah, I mean, I think for me it's the right thing to do, and they'll hopefully regroup next year. But one thing that does concern me a little bit, Nate, and that is that statement at the end of kind of the press release where they said, "We look forward to bringing you E3 2021 as a reimagined event that brings fans, medias, and the industry together in a showcase that celebrates global video game industry." That sounds exactly like 2020. So have they not learned anything, from this? Are they not going to get in a round table discussion with the big dogs from the big publishers and the big corporate bigwigs at the ESA and come up with a strategy and a plan to really reinvigorate the show and make it what it used to be back in kind of the good old days? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that final sentence really stuck out to me because it's exactly what they said they were planning for E3 2020 of having that influencer fan public focus. And I know I've talked to a lot of people who work in marketing and publishing in the industry today. And whenever I ask them about the news, their concern was never, oh no, we're not going to be able to cater to the fans this year. Their focus was more about networking, more about connecting with independent developers or connecting just with developers in general, or even media who may not get the opportunity to cover their games outside of an event like a E3. None of them were saying, oh, it's such a shame we can't cater to those 15,000, public attendees. I still think that is the wrong direction for E3 to move in. I think E3 needs to return to its trade show roots, cater to the media who can then deliver the information to fans and such, because now we have a lot more public venues. We have a lot more public events with PAX East, PAX West, PAX South, GDC, and even the Tokyo Game Show. These are more prevalent today than they were even a decade ago. And I think E3 has always really had that identity crisis where the ESA wanted to retain that professionalism, but they also wanted to take that step forward and say, well, we're going to be professional, but we're also going to allow the public in. And so far, probably in the last 5 years or so, that mix has not meshed well. It's an oil and water type combination. The media does not want to compete with the public who are waiting in line. And I mean, as the media, it's my job. You being public who is just there for fun, if you're preventing me from getting to a demo or you're preventing me easy access in the venue itself, you're basically putting my job at jeopardy. You're costing me the opportunity to conduct interviews just so you can say I played a demo for 15 minutes. And that's something, if the ESA wants to go forward, then just again host your own public event. Have it the week after. Talk to the publishers and say, what demos do you want here? Because E3, a lot of these demos, they're unfinished. They break. They're not representative of the final build. And media understand that. They know when they're playing it that this can break. A public attendee plays it breaks. He goes or she goes, they go to a forum afterward, they go to Twitter, they could even go to YouTube. And they could say, I played the latest game from major publisher Y and it broke.
Yeah.
Now that spreads, and that's negative news that everyone else understood. Now I write my preview, or maybe I make my YouTube video, and I'm just going to talk about my experience. Yes, the demo broke, but they told you before, so it will break.
Right.
And when you have more of a public event, like we have the Best Buy events during E3 week, they're generally the same demos that we have on the show floor, but you have a employee there. So if it breaks, they kind of tell you like, hold on, the system broke. We're going to fix it up really quick for you. They can also come with a little more of a stable build because they'll give you something more dated. It could come from a trade show from a year ago. E3 is always the latest. They're never giving you an outdated build at E3 because they need those new impressions. So I really hope, because we are over a year away from E3 2020, I hope they have continuous meetings and they kind of shift away from that focus that last sentence put out there, and they don't pivot and lean on influencers and public attendance. Like fans are important. Fans are why the industry exists, but we can cater to them with their own dedicated event. And I saw someone tweet it earlier. I forget the individual who did it, but they said, if you're a fan of the industry and you've always fantasized about going to E3, if you want to experience it, go to a PAX, because that's really what you're fantasizing, where you're going to meet with fans, you're going to talk about the games you love, you're going to meet people with similar interests. E3 is work.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, when we're there, do we talk about the games? You say, oh, I just played that latest thing, it was pretty fun. But as soon as I'm done saying that 5-word sentence, I'm off to my next appointment.
Right.
You don't have time to, especially on the show floor, just appreciate everything about the industry. Like, yeah, you can look at the booth and say, wow, that's amazing what they did, but it's work.
Yeah.
PAX East is about fun. So and that's what a lot of people fantasize. They come up with this fantasy version of what E3 is. And then when you actually go there, it doesn't live up to your dream and your expectation. It's, oh, wait, this is actually a trade show.
Yeah, exactly. I think you bring up some really good points, Nate. I think the thing that really hurts is the indie developer that's looking for a distributor to publish their game, or vice versa. You got publishers looking to sign up new games that they haven't been, they've maybe heard about but not seen in person, and just all those business meetings and those interactions between developers and publishers, developers, all the networking that goes on. I think that's the kind of the stuff that you don't see is really what will hurt the absence of both GDC and E3. I think the kind of both of those things that no longer are going to happen this year really does hurt that style or that side of the of the equation on the video game side. The in-person meeting, the opportunities, all those things just won't occur. And I guess I have two different ways of looking at this. The first one is there's probably some relief from some studios because they don't have to crunch a demo and get it ready for E3. And I think that's significant, because I think a lot of the times if you're working on a game, typically you'll have to stop and gonna prepare something for E3 to get it ready for the show floor and whatever keynote presentation you may be involved in. So I think there's definitely some relief there, but there's also, I think, mostly disappointment from development studios, that especially the ones that are smaller indie studios that maybe have some really cool game that they wanted to show off at E3 and get the attention of the publishers. Unfortunately, that those types of things won't happen. But I also think that there has to be other ways. There has to be another option here. This can't be the only thing that people were hanging their hat on to become recognized, or to make a name for themselves or get their game out there. There has to be and I get that GDC really hurt a lot of people as far as getting recognized as well. But we can't just rely on these big shows for these things. I think if there's a takeaway, a big takeaway from this year and the cancellation of E3 it has to be, we have to come up with something else. Business still has to continue. Games still have to be bought, and publishers still have to identify and buy indie developers and stuff like that. That stuff has to continue, and I think really we have to come up with a solution for that, because we certainly don't want creativity and games to stop coming out because of things like this. We definitely want it to continue, and I think if anything, the ESA and the publishers really need to kind of sit down and figure out what that means and what that looks like going forward. They can't hang their hat on a big trade show like this that potentially could get cancelled. And there's also, a lot of questions about, well, is this it for E3? Do you think it's going to come back next year? I personally think it will, but a lot of people are kind of unsure about it. I think E3 will come back because it's been 25 years since they've had the show. They've endured a lot of things over many years. I don't see this as the end, but I also feel like the pressure for them to return next year and come back with something absolutely spectacular is huge. So I know I said a lot of things there, but what are your thoughts on, I guess, the publisher developer relationship meeting type things, and do you think that E3 will return next year?
I think E3 will return next year. I'm just uncertain the form in which it will return. If it returns in the form that E3 2019 was and the intended E3 2020 was, where it's going to be, the celebrities, influencers, fan focused, then I think that's going to raise a lot of concern with some publishers and even some media outlets, because we already saw it happen with this year with Jeff Keighley and such. Mm-hmm. So hopefully they are able to find at least some sort of compromise if they are to come back, because I know a growing concern is that without E3 this year is that it's going to make it very apparent to a lot of these publishers who maybe previously used E3 as that jumping off point. And I'm talking still like mid-tier to, they're not, I'm not talking like an indie tier studio. I'm talking like mid-tier level, is that they're going to realize they just saved a lot of money by not attending E3. And that budget could be used for whether it's to reach out to an influencer to show their game, or maybe even host a media event where they're able to fly some media out to get some of that public attention. These are now something that the budget may allow that E3 previously, negated. So E3 2021 is definitely going to be something interesting to see how it happens, if there are going to be significant changes, if maybe they finally do implement a 5-day schedule, 3 days are committed to the media, 2 days are open to the public, where, that's a nice compromise, I think. But as you touched on, E3 is a very complex ecosystem of values. We have, today we've seen the reactions from fans, media, and developers and publishers. And the reactions from the developers and publishers are, they are, as you said, a lot of them are disappointed that they're not able to have meetings with, some other publishers or developers to possibly sign deals, or maybe talk about upcoming projects that a mid-tier developer has who doesn't necessarily, they're not committed to a single publisher. And they want to say, what's your, I'll use the Untitled Goose Game team just as an example of a developer. They're saying, what's your next game? Because you caught our interest with that. And we know you self-published, but maybe, someone like, Team 17 might say, we want to see what your next game is. You caught our interest. Tell us about it. Now, all of a sudden, it could just be by chance encounter of I bump into you at E3, recognize your name badge and the name of the company, and now we just networked, we just had a meeting, and now that can completely change my career path. That not happening this year, it will have ripples. We'll have a ripple effect in the industry moving forward. Now the question really is, how big do the waves become from these ripples? Are they just going to be, is it just going to be a minor wave that really isn't going to cause any industry erosion? Or is this going to be a tsunami where the flood is going to impact creativity, possibly prevent some indie studios of getting that deal that could have propelled them to the next level to create that next game that they simply do not have the funding for? These are questions we'll never get answers to, unfortunately, probably until sometime next summer, where maybe a developer comes out and says, we had meetings booked for GDC and E3 2020 that didn't happen. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get the funding necessary to make, the next Hollow Knight from, a random studio, and they had to shut their doors. I mean, that's devastating to the industry, but we don't know if that will happen for certain yet. The possibility is definitely there, and
Yeah.
that's concerning.
Got a question for you. So GameSpot broke the story 30 minutes before the ESA did, exactly at 9:30 Pacific time this morning, which was the rumor when the announcement was going to get made. And then 30 minutes later, the statement kind of appeared on the ESA's website, and then they tweeted about it. Why do you think GameSpot broke the story? Do you think there's anything there that went on behind the scenes that we're not privy to? I thought that was very interesting because I was on the ESA's website, kind of refreshing their page at 9:30, waiting for it, to pop up, and then on Twitter, the first thing I see is GameSpot is kind of announced it, and I was like, that's a little strange that a media outlet kind of announced the cancellation of E3. Do you think I'm just reading too much into this, or do you think there's something there that we don't know about?
I'd say you're probably reading a little too much into it.
Fair enough.
I wouldn't be surprised if maybe due to daylight savings time that it was just an embargo misunderstanding. So that's what I would assume. I wouldn't read too much into it otherwise. I'd say either they just somehow they had enough backing, they had the scoop, they could rent it, or they accidentally broke embargo and they looked at it and said, well, it's only 30 more minutes, the hell with it.
Yeah.
I mean, that does happen. Embargoes, especially when it comes to daylight savings times and all the time zones, it happens more often than not just due to a simple misunderstanding or misread of exactly how the embargo was written, because some of the embargoes are so convoluted that when you're reading it, you think you understood the time and day, and then you read it a second time and you start second guessing yourself and you don't know when you can post anything.
So last week you said that the ESA kind of hangs its hat on E3 as about 50% of its earnings every single year. So let's assume that they're not going to make that money this year. Is that going to hurt them financially? Do you think it's going to make them force a change within the organization to potentially shift some roles around and maybe trim the fat a little bit and just tighten their belt as far as the budget goes?
I can see them tighten their belt a little on the budget. My fear is that, as we saw in their statement, that they want to do this digital event, and my fear is that they're going to charge something for whether it's a premium edition of it where you get maybe a little more access. That's my concern, is that their E3 digital presentation is not going to be entirely free. And so they're going to try to recoup some of those costs in some way, which, I mean, it's fair to them. They're a business. I understand why they would do that. As a fan in the public, if they can promise you, great interviews you're only going to see on that, maybe, and if the price is fair enough, let's say $10 for E3 week, maybe I would accept that. But we're in that, social media age where I really just need one friend who spent the $10, and then whatever interview they did is going to be on Twitter, on YouTube, on forums within seconds anyways.
But how do they get the publishers on board with that? Because Microsoft,
Right.
Ubisoft, Bethesda, Limited Run, Devolver, they're just going to run their own direct style presentations anyway. So how does the ESA convince these publishers that, hey, you guys, funnel all that stuff through us, we'll take care of it for you, we'll charge a certain amount of money for the privilege of watching your event? I mean, why do they need the ESA at that point? And I guess that's the difficulty that I have with that.
Like, the only thing I could really see them doing at that point would be maybe if I'm more of a mid-tier publisher and developer and I was really hoping to, show my game to the public with a demo, and now that is removed, maybe if the ESA is able to reach out to, and I am not a fan of this practice, but if I was the ESA, let's just say I reached out to Dr. Disrespect or Ninja,
Yeah.
and I had a demo from mid-tier publisher X, and they played it on the ESA stream. Now,
Yeah.
you as the publisher, you handed over, let's even say 25% of what E3 would have cost them. Now you potentially are going to draw a lot more eyes to the ESA's digital E3 because of the presenters and influencers they would have on board. Even if, let's say, they hired Kind of Funny Games, you had Greg Miller host an ESA, event, and they played the demo from these publishers. Even though the publishers themselves are not there, they name drop the game, they name the company, they play that demo for 10 to 15 minutes, kind of like a Nintendo Treehouse Live, but with a broad spectrum of third-party and independent games. Maybe that would be something they could explore, but I mean, this is something they'd have to really get the ball rolling on in the next 2.5 months to have organized and have the infrastructure set up for.
Yeah. And that's the part that I think they are not equipped to have, especially considering their very lackluster website that they have. And they've never really, they don't really have a social presence at all, really, a social media presence other than the occasional tweet and the occasional press release. They don't really have, they don't have like a Twitch channel, or they don't have a YouTube channel where they kind of announce events. Look, I'm not saying they can't mount something like that in the time, and maybe they could kind of hand it off to someone to kind of manage it for them, but I just wonder if it's even relevant, that they do that. And to your point, the mid-tier or the lesser known developers that want to get some recognition that were going to be at E3, they could pay for a 15-minute spot on a live stream where some big influencer's playing their game and there's like 100,000 people viewing it. I mean, sure, that there's definitely value there, and there's definitely money there, but I just wonder if they have enough time, just like the show, whether they have enough time to mount all this, in what, 2.5 months or 3 months.
Right, and that's really, I mean, it's a tough question because we really can't. It's tough to predict what the move going forward would be, and at the same time, if I'm that publisher or the developer, I mean, Microsoft put out a few weeks ago where they said our E3 planning starts in January. That's true for a lot of companies. So you're 3 months into planning, now it's canceled. Whether that was pausing development so you could get an E3 demo build ready, because that can take, I believe it's anywhere from about a month to 6 weeks to get a E3 demo build, set.
Yeah.
It's not like a trivial amount of time. It's not just, sit down on Monday, we need it for Tuesday. It can be a month's worth of work.
Yeah, I mean, it has to go through the QA process to make sure it doesn't break. If they're kind of demoing on the main stage at a keynote speech, it definitely needs to be road tested before it goes out there. So yeah, I mean, it's almost like a mini development project within the bigger life cycle of the game that they're currently building, and it takes resources off of the main game that's currently being developed.
Right. So that's where I'm kind of like, you've already committed 3 months to whether it's marketing, getting demos ready, presentation style, or even just, consulting with, like, if I'm Microsoft and Nintendo, by January, I was already contacting publishers to say, hey, we want to showcase your game in our E3 Direct or at our E3, presentation. And now you have to imagine those talks are probably that's still going to happen. Whoever Microsoft had set to appear on stage this E3 is still going to happen. It's just obviously not in front of a live audience. It's just going to be pre-recorded with Phil Spencer and maybe whoever else from Microsoft coming out and talking. You're probably not going to have the random employees from EA or Square come out to talk about their Series X games. It's just going to be more Microsoft focused, which is fine. There's just so many moving parts that now have just suddenly hit the brake.
Yeah.
And it's a lot there's a lot of inertia happening here. There's no way you can fully stop the events that were in motion from January. It's just too much. So I guess it's kind of all of those little studios even the marketing departments, you're going to do something because you've already committed resources to it. And now, whether it's the ESA or if it's just going to Twitch on your own, you're finding some way to get your message out. And at the same time, if I'm a company and I say maybe I'm ready by the second week of May, do you roll the dice and try to get that spotlight on you a little early, or do you still wait for E3 week because people are anticipating something due to the ESA statement, or even Microsoft and Nintendo? Even though Nintendo hasn't said anything yet, we're more or less expecting Nintendo to, stay course. They're going to do their E3 or June Direct that Tuesday.
Yep.
So would you, as a smaller company, still say our plan was to show our game on the show floor on Tuesday? Now, since we're not doing that, maybe we can talk to Twitch and we can stream it really quick that day, because you've already committed resources. You don't want to just write that off as a pure loss. You want to get something in return.
Yeah, and I worry that the ESA will jack up the prices for next year as well to kind of recoup some of those costs. I mean, I'm sure that they have the appropriate insurance policies in place for things like this, for cancellation type insurance, which is something that most big companies have a cancellation policy in place. So they're probably not going to lose that much money. I think they'll just file a couple of claims and recoup that cost. But I also do think that they will push that onto the general public for next year. They'll probably increase prices. And, my biggest worry is that nothing changes next year. And something really does need to change with E3. I mean, one of the things, I want to be very clear on is I don't want E3 to go away. I do not want it to go away. Even though we've been very critical of E3, especially the last 9 or 10 months of just screw up after screw up, it seems like, and losing Sony and the doxing thing, and just kind of a lot of situations that haven't made them look very good in the public eye. Even given all that, I mean, I don't want E3 to go away, because it is a landmark event. E3 week is a special time, and sure, the last couple of years hasn't been terribly exciting, not like the way it used to be, but I don't think it's too far away from getting back to the way it used to be, and I think if they just change a couple of things for the better, they can get it back, and I think we've touched on some of those things, but I definitely don't want it to go away. I really am, bummed that it has been cancelled this year, but I also, again, am not surprised one bit that it has, honestly.
Right. Like, what we basically have criticized in the past is we're criticizing it because we want it to do better. We don't want to see it collapse and disappear. Is that we're looking at it and say, you guys can make these changes and you can refine that magic. But when you have companies like Sony really saying in a public manner, E3, you have no use to us. We don't need you. We can connect to our fans in our own way. We can host our own event like PSX. We can do state of plays. You are obsolete. And how the ESA's response is, well, we're just going to do the status quo and, stay on the same heading. That's what we've been critical of.
Yeah.
Is that this is a company and an organization who seems resistant to change. And unfortunately, with the events that have transpired this year, it's a bad situation all in all, but this might be that chance for them to say, we have another year to look, to talk, to change, to evolve. Because I think they could get Sony back at it if they provide incentive for Sony to be there.
Yep, I totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah. And that's like Sony left because they want to control their message. They want to host the event on their terms. They want to invite media into their house to play the demos that they're ready to show. When they announce or formally announce and show the PlayStation 5, it is going to be an exclusive list of media outlets who are in attendance. They will have a handful of demos on the floor, and Sony is going to restrict what you see, what you say, and what you can show people based on those demos. Once E3 opened those doors to the public, they now have to fear that you're going to take out your phone and you're going to try to film, PS5 launch game number 3 from across the booth because you want internet fame. Well, no one in the media is going to do that because they're not going to break an embargo and potentially risk getting fined and getting blacklisted. Anonymous Twitter user number 7 doesn't care. They just want those 15 minutes of fame, or they're going to throw it on YouTube, make a quick buck, and that's it. That's where, especially going into next gen, or we've even seen E3 where people try to steal the demos.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's a terrifying thought because, or they try to steal like debug units. That's scary to a company, and it also shows your security isn't good, and that's concerning. No one in the media is going to do that. I mean, you might have one idiot who does, and they're blacklisted from the industry as a whole if they ever get caught. Even thinking about doing it, they'll get blacklisted from the industry. So I just want to see E3 really go back to those roots, focus on having the media be their focal point, make the developer and the publisher and the industry their number one priority. The fans are great. Make that a secondary event. And just talk to the publishers. I mean, compete with PAX. There's nothing particularly special about any of the PAX events. It's just publishers go to a public event. They throw up a few demo stations. I mean, Nintendo literally had Animal Crossing. And that's it this month at PAX East last month. They had one game. That's more than enough. It's all like as a marketing tool for a publisher, that's fine. If I'm Sony and I'm going there, I'd be like, okay, we can throw The Last of Us 2. I don't need to have my PlayStation 5 games open to the public. At least I have that sense of control.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I want the ESA to try. Because then I think you can have that industry magic and you can also cater to the fans. And it's that nice middle ground as for the industry where they're making money by catering to the fans. The publishers are getting tons of marketing between fans and media, and they're still doing their conferences and their press events, and they're that highlight for the week.
Yeah.
And and you also kind of negate a little bit of the cannibalism that happens where, I mean, like, let's be real here. E3 this year was really going to be all about the Xbox Series X. Did it matter what anyone else was going to have playable on the floor if it wasn't a groundbreaking, revolutionary new game?
That's a great point. You're absolutely right. It's absolutely all about the Series X.
And that's the thing. Like, Sony's not there, so people weren't even going to be the stampede to the Sony booth. They were going to stampede to the Microsoft booth.
Yeah, right.
And all these other games that aren't on the Series X, yeah, they'd have people go, but that was the interest. That was the hype. So the public going to E3 2020, they want to see next gen. They don't care what's coming. They weren't going to go over there and see what's coming to the PS4 from a third-party developer later this year. They would once they realize the Series X line is 9 hours long. But
it's true.
Like that was the focus of E3 this year. Everyone I've talked to, industry related, was basically saying, well, should I go to E3 this year? Because the next gen consoles are going to be there. That's why I want to go.
Yeah.
It wasn't, oh, Square's going to have the Avengers game.
Right.
No, that wasn't your care. It was, I might be able to play the PlayStation 5 and Series X.
Even Cyberpunk, which has been there like 2 years in a row. Sure, it'd be cool to play another demo of it, but I mean, no one's going to go to E3 to play Cyberpunk again,
Yeah, if you've been there, if you've played it the last 2 times, it's like, you know what, you're coming out in a few months. I don't need to play you again.
Right.
Or, the public, they say, well, I haven't played it yet, which is, cool if they have that separate event. And that's where I want the ESA to grow and change. And their statement today just does not give me that confidence. And the last thing I kind of want to touch on this topic is where does E3, with the cancellation this year, how do you think publishers can basically come to the fans in a, I don't want to say a direct manner this year, but do you think some might release demos on Steam if it suits, if their release is coming soon? Do you think you might see a little more of that type of implementation from companies, or they'll say, we have the E3 demo, we have no one to show it. If we can get it on a Steam, even if it's, or even PSN or Xbox or Switch, even if it's just up there for a week, maybe we'll do that. And not necessarily E3 week, but maybe just in that month of June.
Yeah, I think so, Nate. I think that you mentioned E3 week. I would say that right now there are a lot of developers out there that are thinking about what they're going to do during that week or that month, even though there's no show. So yeah, I would say that a lot of them are preparing demos for, we'll say, Steam or PlayStation Network or Xbox Live for that very reason. Now, again, the difficulty is obviously, marketing that and getting your name out. But I think we'll probably see that and I'm just using air quotes, but the E3 week this year will be something very, very interesting, very extraordinary. There's going to be a lot of, obviously, direct style, pre-recorded keynote speaks sessions from Microsoft, Ubisoft, Bethesda, Devolver, Limited Run. But I think we're going to see a lot of that stuff come up, and I honestly think it's going to be kind of cool. That the fans will still get a taste of pretty much what they've always gotten. Every year, the person that sits at home, and most people sit at home and watch, YouTube and Twitch. Nothing's really going to change for them, I would say. I think there's still going to be a steady stream of announcements that get made, and there will be a bigger influx of playable demos, like you said, on Steam and things like that. Maybe even offer, hey, play free for E3 week and get early access or whatever it is. So I think we'll see a lot of innovation and maybe some new things coming from that particular week. But yeah, I mean, to your point, I do think that we will see more publishers and more developers come up with playable demos, early access, betas, whatever you want to call it, alpha releases, anything really to kind of get their name out there. And I think, to the average person that is a fan of video games and E3, it's not really going to be that much different, other than the fact that there is not a big convention going on in Los Angeles, during that week.
Right. So do you think any company, be it Microsoft or Sony, even Nintendo, do you think any of them maybe take advantage of this and air their digital presentation maybe the week earlier, or maybe even a week later? Hell, they could even wait a month later. You think any of them are going to deviate from what was previously a set in stone schedule?
That's a great question. I think that, Gamescom's in August, right? So I don't think they want to stray too far after, we'll say, the E3 week this year, because you're approaching Gamescom at that point. But then again, Microsoft could say, hey, we're gonna drop the Series X announcement a couple of weeks out before Gamescom. That may be the right time for them. But I would say that, honestly, I think it will. I don't think everything's going to drop that week. I mean, obviously, there's a lot more freedom and flexibility to pretty much make your announcements when you need to. But I do think that the month of June will kind of be littered with these announcements. I think they'll be adequately spaced apart as far as the big guys. They certainly won't be, Microsoft on day one and then Sony the next day and Nintendo the following day. I think they'll all do their own thing, but I still think that they're all kind of leaning towards, June as the time where they make their big announcements.
See, that's the interesting thing, because it's been a lot of like the rumor where Microsoft and Sony are playing cat and mouse with each other when it comes to PS5 and Series X details, though right now it feels like Microsoft is probably more of the cat and Sony's the mouse. If you're Microsoft, more or less in the lead. Do you think it's going through their heads at all right now saying, we can wait? Like Sony knew we were going to come into E3, but now we kind of have that luxury. We can wait. Like we've come out and said we're still gonna E3 is a big thing. We're gonna do a digital thing. But where's our where's our rush? But even to Sony, now they're sitting there saying, well, Microsoft, we knew Microsoft was doing E3. Now they're still saying they're gonna do it. Can we wait?
Yeah, it does change things around slightly. And I guess the other thing that we have to consider is the situation around the world right now, whether that has, because we've heard some grumblings that it may potentially delay things as far as the release and the launch of these things of the systems. So does that change the thought process there? I would say that it's business as usual, at least for the first part of this, and that is, I would expect both Sony and Microsoft to come out with their keynote presentations and unveil hardware around that time.
Right.
Whether whoever does it first, I couldn't tell you honestly. I mean, like you said, right now Microsoft is the cat, and they're kind of in this commanding position. They're also going to be doing a couple of GDC, pre-recorded presentations, I think next week, and there'll be some
Yep.
Series X talk there. I wouldn't get too excited if I was a fan. There'll definitely be some talk about it, but don't expect games or anything to be shown. So, Microsoft is definitely the cat right now, but I've seen things like this happen before, and Sony can quickly fire a shot, and all of a sudden it's kind of even keel again. So I think Sony is, look, there's no doubt. I have no doubt that they're a little rattled at the moment. They were a little rattled, but I think their silence over the last 4-6 weeks, hopefully, I think they've got their heads down and they're really kind of grinding to get ready for the middle of this year.
Right. Yeah. I would imagine most of the internal marketing plans, even though dates are always penciled in and, pencils have erasers so they can change. But I think a lot of the internal marketing, even with this change, is they're still sitting there saying, from January, we planned on June or May, depending, if I'm Sony. And they're still looking at that saying, this is what we've been planning for. This is what we've been allocating for. E3 or not, this is still what we're targeting. We do have a little luxury, maybe if, due to the worldwide situation, maybe things have shifted a little bit, but I feel like regardless of whether E3 happened or not, those penciled in dates are still sitting there. They haven't been erased or changed just yet. But one thing I do think is going to change significantly this year is that we are not going to have that routine and traditional flood of E3 leaks.
Yes.
There's just no reason for things to leak. There's no booths to build. You're not going to have the guy who sees the signage and takes a picture and puts it on 4chan. That's not going to happen because it does not exist. And I know sometimes E3 servers, people try to hack into them, or sometimes it's just a vulnerability on a media site for their E3 side of things, and they just leave it open for some silly reason. Now there's really no reason to put all those assets in 3 days ahead of time in anticipation of a live event and making sure they go live the second the person name drops your game. They can wait. So we're probably not going to get those, week before E3 leaks that everyone's become so accustomed to.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and maybe that's all it takes for E3 to change and evolve back to the way it was. Because look, the leaks, it's kind of part and parcel of E3 week, but it really did hurt a lot of publishers last year, those types of things. And if this is one way to stamp it out, then I'm all about it. I think it's definitely something they need to look into. Other than the insider that has seen the presser and is leaking things out to the media. You're right. I mean, we're not going to see anywhere near as many leaks this year than we did last year, where practically the whole show was leaked before it even started.
Right. Yeah. Last year was brutal. Like Microsoft was just about to take stage, and I think it was within about like half an hour to maybe an hour, their whole show leaked in perfect order of the series of events. And people were like, wow, that list was, it was the comprehensive 100% list. Some looked at it originally saying, well, maybe this is just some of it. And then all of a sudden Ubisoft comes up and their whole thing leaks. And it was like, everything's leaking. How is everything leaking in chronological order? And eventually that was discovered why. And that was just a mess in and of itself. But I mean, maybe that can bring about some excitement this year, that you don't know what's coming, you don't know when it's coming, and you don't know who's going to bring it.
Yep.
And I mean, that's kind of going back to E3 being, the Christmas gift to the kid in the morning. You don't know what's behind the wrapping paper this year. And that's something everyone can actually look forward to as like a fan. When you really have no idea what to anticipate, that's cool. Or like Nintendo this year. Nobody had any idea when to expect a Nintendo Direct.
Yep.
And well, instead of sitting there with anticipation, it became a little, sitting in the corner, rocking back and forth, with the teddy bear saying the Direct is coming.
Yeah,
but
I believe we covered that a couple of weeks ago, and people still are asking, where's the Direct?
Luckily, they were finally given a rumor this week, and it set some minds at ease. It's maybe there's an indie one next week and a general Direct the week following, but hope is on the horizon after the new horizon, which is known as Animal Crossing.
Yes.
So the horizon after that, there is hope that maybe a Direct will air before the month of March concludes. So
You heard it here first, guys.
if you made it this far into the episode, you heard it here first. You have to make a comment in the section below saying, I heard it here first. And then we'll know you made it this long.
So, Nate, I got one quick question before we wrap up. It's an important one. Gamescom, is it going to happen?
Yes.
I think so too. I think that the first half of the year obviously has been kind of closed off from pretty much anything. I think the second half of the year is on schedule and on track. I don't think there's any reason why it wouldn't happen. But of course, things can certainly change over the next couple of weeks, given the situation.
Yeah, depending on how the situation changes or evolves in the next, month or so, obviously everything can change. But right now, I think Gamescom does happen because a lot of the events that they have postponed from either February or March, they postponed them to like September or October. So I do think they're hopeful that by the second half of this year, that events and public gatherings can return to normal. I know, like today we also saw Bit Summit get canceled, which is a big deal for like Japan, and obviously it didn't hit the monumental news barrier breaking that E3 did. But yeah, Gamescom I think will take place. I think Tokyo Game Show will take place. Now, I mean, my personal concern is that the Euro Cup will be canceled, but hopefully maybe they just play in empty stadiums like the NCAA and the NBA are going to be doing in the coming weeks. But yeah, Gamescom I definitely think happens. I know the situation in Europe right now isn't good. Italy is basically completely shut down. And I mean, shut down for the next 2 weeks. So we have to wait and see how next 2 weeks go and whether or not, countries see a spike after they do these quarantined time frames. And if things settle down after the quarantines, that'd be a good sign for the second half that public gatherings and such can occur, because to my understanding we're probably still a year out from any sort of vaccine. But based on everything going on now, I do think Gamescom takes place in it's August.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it happens in August.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's any cause for concern that it will get cancelled at this point. I think it's going to be on schedule, and you're right. I do think the Tokyo Game Show will also be on this year as well.
I think anything beyond anything beyond July, I think right now is looking safe based on, today. Now we could revisit this in June and might, might be saying Gamescom will be canceled then. But yeah, today in the now, I think Gamescom, Tokyo Game Show, even the next generation systems, I think they all launch without any problem.
Yeah, I'm still a little unsure about Sony. I do think there is potential it may push into early next year, but I don't think if that's the case, it would be anything significant. It would definitely still be in the holidays kind of window of 2020, 2021.
Yeah, if I think Microsoft launches this holiday basically no matter what, unless the situation becomes much more dire and much more severe, and we see China revert back to what their situation was in February and late January. Sony, they do seem to still be kind of on a balancing beam. If they do have to get delayed, then the latest they launch is March.
Yep.
I don't see them going beyond that because the holiday season is just, it's a very important thing. And after March, you run a risk of launching a new system because, like April, you have tax returns and such, and nobody in May is really hankering to buy a brand new system at launch because it's May. You'll sell out, but it's just a weird time. You want those holiday dollars sitting in your wallet in January and February and burning a hole in them still in March, or you just want that November, December holiday craze where you'll buy anything off the shelf, even if you don't need it and it has no games.
Yep.
So, a lot to look forward to in the second half of 2020. Whether or not E3 is there, we still have a lot to look forward to and should have a lot of announcements coming between now and June. And it'll be interesting to see how developers and publishers change their marketing plans with E3 now officially canceled. So that will do it for this episode of Nate the Hate. You can find MVG's channel in the description below. As always, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me on the show, man. It's always been fun to chat, and on to the next one.
Absolutely, always a pleasure. So everyone else, be sure to like the video if you enjoyed this. If you did not, give it a dislike. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. And until next time, continue to embrace the hate.